Hi, I'm Mike Ryan. Turquoise has played an important role in Navajo and Pueblo jewelry, but turquoise has played a perhaps even more important role long before in the lives of these people. We tell part of that story in part 1 of Turquoise in America, the Great American Turquoise Rush, 1890 to 1910, when in chapter 1, we describe how the ancestral Puebloan mined turquoise throughout the Southwest as early as 600 to 800 AD. And we know this because of all the turquoise that was found at Pueblo Bonito in Chaco Canyon. And that demonstrated, the archaeologists found ways to identify that turquoise where they could show that it came from different mines from California, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, and all traded there at Chaco Canyon. So we want to give a recognition to these early turquoise miners. Among the Navajo, turquoise has played an important part in their ceremonies for since the earliest times. And I want to talk a little bit, or let Zeke Arganeas talk a little bit about that creation story. When Zeke tells his story in part 3 of Turquoise in America, the stories of turquoise, 1990 to 2020. And this is what Zeke has to say. Let me add that Zeke is a young Navajo jeweler who uses the old techniques. He uses a hand drill and the old files, and he's also studying to be a Navajo medicine man. Part of our creation story begins with the 4 sacred gems: white shell turquoise, abalone, and black jet, or the obsidian stone. Oratory divinity pulled matter from blue twilight and darkness and created the turquoise stone. After the other sacred gems were created, the first hand drills were made: a white shell hand drill, turquoise hand drill, abalone hand drill, and jet hand drill. Each of the 4 hand drills had different shapes and dimensions. Together, these 4 pump drills were used in the creation of animals, human anatomy, the environment we live in, and all else we know in our universe. Many of our old ones talk about how our bodies contain the sacred elements. It is said that half our blood vessels are blue, the other half red. Divides right in half, from the head down between the legs. The blue vein is the turquoise branch, and the red vein is the coral branch. So, turquoise plays such an important role in the lives of the Navajo and Pueblo people, and trying to cover this topic of jewelry, turquoise in jewelry, is really such a vast topic we can only scratch the surface. So we're just going to focus on 3 artists: 1 Navajo, Fred Peshlikai, and 2 Pueblo, Joe Quintana from Cochiti and Julian Lovato from Kiwa, or Santo Domingo. We see here in this photo of Fred with Hostine Kla, which was taken 1933 at the World Fair, which was the Century of Progress. Isn't that fitting, where we see the old medicine man, Hostine Kla, and we see this new generation of Native American jewelers represented by Fred Peshlikai. Fred's father was slender maker of silver, known as Peshlikai, who was one of the earliest Navajo jewelers, but he worked in the traditional style, very heavy style, because he was making jewelry for his own people, and they really appreciated heavier jewelry. Fred, of course, was now making jewelry for a new tourist market that really needed a lighter, more open style. Fred also had access to fine turquoise because his studio in Los Angeles was around the corner from the American Gem Company, which was owned by Doc Wilson, who owned both the Lone Mountain and Blue Gem turquoise mines. So, our next photo is of Julian Lovato, and Julian was really recognized for using just the finest in turquoise in his jewelry. And we're going to see a couple of examples of that in just a moment. But first, let's look at a wonderful squash blossom of Joe Quintana. And while we're looking at that, I want to read a little bit from Turquoise in America, Part 2, 1910 to 1990. And in this, we're going to listen to a story by Sippy Crazy Horse, who is Joe's son and is a master jeweler himself. My mom was the designer for my father's work. Her name was Teresita. She had an eye for turquoise stones. One of the places she bought stones was Zachary's in Albuquerque. They had the best number 8 spider web, blue gem, and Bisbee. She could picture what stone was going to be in what piece, and then go back to the house and sketch it out. Back in the early 60s, my dad worked for Manny Goodman. That's at the Covered Wagon in Albuquerque. Manny was good to him, but kind of held him back on what my dad wanted to make. After he started working for Irma Bailey at Irma's Indian Arts and Pawn, things changed a lot. She let him make whatever he wanted. Here's the silver, Joe. Here are the stones. Make whatever turns you on. So, we also next see a close-up of this number 8 turquoise in this magnificent squash blossom, so elegant in its design, this wonderful fleur-de-lis squash blossoms. As I mentioned, Julian Lovato was known for using very high-grade turquoise, and we see in this photo a pendant that he made with some really, really high-grade Lone Mountain turquoise. And the next photo is an example of some very high-grade Nevada blue in this ring. And we don't often see this grade of Nevada blue in Native American jewelry because it was just really hard to find it. There wasn't a lot of it at this grade. Finally, let's talk a little bit more about Fred. And we're going to see some photos courtesy of the Shaman's Lodge. In the first one, we see some wonderful blue gem in this photo. And then we're going to follow that with some number 8 in the next piece of jewelry. And finally, we're going to see a great example of how open and clean Fred's design was, where we see this pin with this really wonderful Lone Mountain turquoise. So, although we just scratched the surface, I hope you've gotten a little bit of an idea of the importance of turquoise in Navajo and Pueblo jewelry.